Hello, everyone. It's September 20th, and we are working on the structure of building the organization of nuclear fusion. And we thought some interesting things might come out in this conversation, specifically because our entire lives have led us, both of us, this is Chris Daniels, this is TT.
Hi.
Our entire lives have led us to creating an organization that does things very differently. And so that's what you're going to be witnessing. And I just want this for like institutional memory. Okay. Chris has been tasked with, what were you tasked with?
I was basically tasked with thinking about how we might begin to structure and organize the business of nuclear fusion, right?
Okay.
So we were tasked with this idea of a for-profit company that is primarily charged with the development and running of the app, and then also this educational arm that is leaning toward a nonprofit because its primary focus and mission is the education of individuals, families, villages around a myriad of topics. And so how would those two coexist?
Yeah.
And so after our last meeting, I realized I have a tendency to overcomplicate things in all facets of my life. So when we left and I was thinking about, okay, how would this function? I think at this juncture that it would be best to have just one entity and organization.
Love that.
So the for-profit nuclear fusion app and the educational arm is a project of the for-profit.
Oh, that feels so much better to me.
So you can get the fiscal sponsorship, which would allow you access to grants and foundations, but that way you're not trying to simultaneously build two organizations, have two self-governing teams. It could just be one self-governing team, and then for the moment see the educational arm as a project.
Okay, so I want to talk about self-governing teams and the educational arm. So if you are new here, Nuclear Fusion is an app which we are developing to help folks find, build, and sustain villages. So it will match you to other people who are also interested in building those chosen families and mutual aid networks. The problem, or what makes nuclear fusion different, is that we will also be providing the education that folks need in order to build healthy relationships and, most importantly, sustain healthy relationships. And this includes knowledge of the rupture repair cycle, boundaries, self-advocacy, the inner work that we all have to do in order to live in healthy relationships, since most of us were not raised in families that modeled these things in a healthy way. So the app can introduce you to 100 million people who want to be in your village, but if you don't know how to engage in those relationships, then it doesn't matter. And that's why the success of nuclear fusion depends on the app functioning and the educational arm being brilliant. And what we want to do is bring in grant money so that these courses are accessible through the app and affordable. And we want to pay mostly BIPOC educators to teach these elements, which I have access to some of the most brilliant BIPOC relationship educators in the world because I got my start here on Remodeled Love, and we all know polyamorous people, especially BIPOC polyamorous people, are the best at this. And so a lot of this app has no relation to polyamory or non-monogamy. However, a lot of the educators come out of that world because these are skills we've had to learn in order to be polyamorous. I feel so much better about the one organization because I feel like that's what I was trying to convey in our last meeting. So now if you could tell everyone what a self-governing business is and why we are trying to build one for nuclear fusion.
Yeah, so self-governing or self-managing is a system that intends to dismantle the dominator hierarchy, where there is this top-down, or even if it's put forth as a bottom-up organization, there's still a pyramid, there's still a hierarchy, which means there's inequities of power, there is a lack of distribution and dissemination of information across the entire organization. People feel very confined within a specific role and don't feel like they can bring their fullest selves to work. And so this has really been informed by this book, so Reinventing Organizations by Frederick
Laloux. It looks French.
Yeah.
And this book was recommended to us by the incredible software developer consultant who was our first hire for nuclear fusion.
Yeah, and fun note about me, if you recommend a book for me to read, I will immediately get it and immediately fixate upon it. So self-management was something that I'd explored a couple of years ago, specifically holacracy, and looking at I was trying to answer the question of like how to develop intrinsic motivation with employees. Like how do people feel connected to a purpose? How do they have drive and motivation to contribute, and especially beyond their role. You know, I've worked in the nonprofit arena for my entire career, and there's weird boundaries because it's work-life balance is hard. You're often putting in so much more and experiencing that burnout and experiencing sometimes that resentment of putting in too much that you didn't want to put in, but also this idea of very defined, rigid roles. And that there's a particular way of doing things, and that there are power, like concentrations of power, where it's like you have a board, you have an executive team, you have these different teams and groups, and they all have a small piece of the overall organization. So people feel very siloed, they feel very well, that's not my job, that's not my responsibility. I also feel very disconnected maybe to the mission as a whole because I'm only seeing this one piece of it.
You also have people making decisions who aren't on the ground doing the actual work. So you have boards making decisions, and the people on the ground are like, that's not going to work, and here's why. And they're like, we don't care, we're the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was something that this idea alone has rooted in my brain, and I have fixated on it. The author says that this idea of empowerment, which is, you know, it is a word that is thrown around quite a bit in many arenas. The idea of empowerment means that one person is bestowing power upon another, which by definition, they could then revoke at any time. So even this idea of like, we're empowering our staff to be vocal, to make decisions, to take initiative, right? We've heard these things. That idea assumes that there is someone granting that power, which means ultimately they could revoke it, they could like veto your decision or whatever you came up to, and we feel that, we know that. And so whenever there's a dominator hierarchy within an organization, people are concerned about their job security, they're concerned about punishment and like repercussions for really doing anything that may displease whoever is above them, right? And then in a dominator hierarchy, people are concerned with moving up the ladder. In a self-management, self-governing system, there is no hierarchy, there is no ladder to climb. And so this notion of competition or that's not my responsibility all begins to dissipate and be eliminated.
And what's cool with the crossover with remodeled love is like it's giving relationship anarchy. It's giving polyamory. It's giving non-hierarchical polyamory. These are things we're trying to achieve in our intimate personal relationships. And now, you know, with what this book teaches, we're also trying to do it in our organizations. And an interesting backstory of Chris and I is that Chris and I have played all those roles in hierarchical organizations. So we have been the displeased leader at the top who has been displeased with the moves of those underneath us, and they have failed us. And they have been ungrateful for all of the things we have done.
I do so much.
And then we have also been the people who have been not appreciated by our overlords and have done things from a place of ego and a place of competition, trying to get to the top, trying to fill our daddy issue needs for recognition and like appreciation and improvement and achievement and and so like we've played all the roles. We're ready to burn all those soul contracts, and we're trying to create something brand new. And so Chris has come in to help me build this self-governing team that hopefully one day is working with millions and millions of dollars to achieve the mission of nuclear fusion. Okay, so you want to, yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. So as sort of a container for this conversation, I want you to think about an evolutionary organization, which is one of the tenets of an evolutionary organization is self-management. I want you to think of it as a neurodivergent organization.
Great. I would not have it any other way.
Absolutely. So an evolutionary organization has three primary facets to it. It is self-management, it is wholeness, and it is evolutionary purpose. So that is what distinguishes an evolutionary organization from, say, like an ambition organization. One that is governed by individual successes, or even a pluralistic organization, which treats organizations as a family. In an evolutionary organization, the business is an entity. It is a living organism in and of itself, and we are stewards of that entity. We are not its controller. So our duty is to pay attention, to listen, to sense, and to respond from that place. Simone has a really great thing where she talks about the soul of the business. Like, what is the soul of the business trying to tell you? And if we can listen to that and tap into that, that will inform us.
God, that's like my dream. That's like literally my wet dream.
Yeah.
Because I love collaboration and I love problem solving, and I specifically love problem solving with really brilliant neurodivergent people, queer people who think there is no box to think outside of. That's how outside of it they are. And like, what a fulfilling career to build. To be like, we have a mission. This mission has its own soul, and all of our jobs is to act in alignment with that purpose. Bring me more.
So, in looking at, I looked at the Kickstarter, I looked at the Instagram. So the evolutionary purpose that I found, helping folks find, build, and sustain their modern village. So everything is supporting the organization's actualization of that purpose, right? So that's how decisions are made. That's how trajectory, what new projects are we taking on is in alignment in support of that evolutionary purpose.
And if I had to add a preposition onto that, which is like too long for, quippy marketing, but like, I think if we had to unpack that more, it's helping folks find, build, and sustain their modern village for the purpose of alleviating survival necessities.
Yeah, that's great.
And that includes emotional and physical surviving. Because like, what's the, again, it ties in the educational element, because I can introduce you to your village, but if that village sucks, it's not going to matter.
Perfect. It's perfect. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about, I think is going to be more applicable when there is more full-time staff, but I do think there are things that can and ought to happen now as we prepare. So I think one of the things that nuclear fusion needs to determine are what are the core assumptions or values that we hold about the people who work there. So this is what I was kind of talking about. The idea of a dominator hierarchy is built on the assumption that workers are inherently bad and that they need micromanagement, that they need control, fear in order to work productively and effectively, that if employees were left to their own devices, they would not...
God, it's giving authoritative parenting.
Yeah, so I just put down for your reference like 2 organizations referenced in the book, like what their assumptions are for the people who work there. So AES, which I believe is a electronic international electronic like not electronics like machines, but like power plants.
Got it.
People who work at AES are creative, thoughtful, trustworthy adults capable of making important decisions, are accountable and responsible for their decisions and actions, are um, fallible, we make mistakes, sometimes on purpose, are unique, and want to use our talents and skills to make a positive contribution to the organization and the world.
What is the overall level of happiness of people who work for that organization? Like, what a cool place to work.
Like, insane. I mean, they talk about dismissals rarely, if ever, happen, and if dismissals do happen, it's because it's not a fit. Either people don't want the self-governing structure, or the organization has shifted and pivoted to a point that their role has changed and it's not necessarily a good fit anymore. People tend to stay because they feel invested, they feel a part of something that's really meaningful. And I think one of the most inherent human needs that we have is belonging and purpose. So the idea that you are instrumental in the place that you work, and that your actions, your choices are directly connected to that mission's purpose. I think people feel insanely fulfilled and happy. Favi, which is a manufacturing company in France, and they build gear parts. Their basic assumptions of their workers are: people are systematically considered to be good, which means they're reliable, self-motivated, trustworthy, intelligent. There's no performance without happiness. To be happy, we need to be motivated. To be motivated, we need to be responsible. To be responsible, we must understand why and for whom we work, and be free to decide how. And value is created on the shop floor. Shop floor operators craft the products. The CEO and staff at best serve to support them, at worst are costly distractions. So these are the assumptions that these organizations have about the people who worked there. And that is instrumental in a self-governing entity, because if there are assumptions about the people who work there that are not in alignment with values like these, then there will not be trust, and there will be a desire to control. And so if there's an assumption that people need control, need management, otherwise they won't do their job, then you've created a dominator hierarchy. So this is number one in terms of what needs to happen, is determining those assumptions about anyone who would come and work on or with nuclear fusion. The second part of a self-governing, self-managing entity is a decision-making process, and a process for handling conflict, feedback, and ruptures within the group. So everyone, well, I don't want to say everyone, but nonviolent communication is referenced pretty much all the time in that book as a method of communication.
I'm in.
So part of onboarding to the organization is that you are trained in nonviolent communication. So what I would add to that is training in restorative justice and restorative justice circles. And so having that be the container for most meetings. And what I like about that is facilitation can rotate. If everyone's trained in RJ circles and how to lead them, then it's not one person who's consistently leading the meeting. And
I love that. And we can pay for that.
Right.
We can pay for everyone to get RJ certified.
Decisions are not made through consensus. So that's one of the biggest myths about self-governance, is that nothing happens because we're constantly relying on consensus, which is not true. There are two, everyone does it a little bit differently, but there were kind of two main ideas. So individual decisions are made by what they call seeking guidance. So in order to make a decision within the organization, you have to get counsel, advice from anyone who may be potentially impacted by that choice. And they can't tell you what to do. There's no like force or vetoing. Instead, it's you gather all this information, this advice, this feedback, and then make a decision from there, which underscores that notion of making the best decision with the information and resources that you have available. And so that way, people don't feel like they have to go through a very long bureaucratic process in order to make a decision. But they are also not making a decision in isolation.
Okay.
Right? So people are aware that they are making this decision, they're giving their feedback on it. And because we inherently trust and because we inherently have these assumptions about, you know, whoever works at nuclear fusion, there is not this distrust of like, oh, if you don't do what I say, or if you don't make the decision that I think you should, then I'm automatically distrustful of you or that decision, right? Because you're making that decision and are ultimately responsible for it, right? So as opposed to like throwing it up the line, like, oh, well, I didn't make this decision, it came from my manager, it came from the board. So responsibility and accountability are constantly being foisted onto someone or something else. It is, if I am making this decision, then following the proper processes and protocols, and if I know what the evolutionary purpose and the core values of the organization, then I am more likely to make a decision that is in alignment and for the in service to the organization, realizing its purpose and actualizing it.
Yeah, so this just happened. We were originally working with like an app development company. Like it's just somebody that shows up when you Google, I have an idea for an app, you know, like that's their business model. And I just had weird feelings about them, and so we hired our software consultant. So at this point in time, the team is me, my assistant Holly, and the software consultant that we hired, who was tasked with, can you decide whether or not we use this company? You know, and so he knew our values based on our interview and what we said we were trying to build, and then he went out and, you know, came back with a 3-page report with like, this is why I do not think that we should use them, but ultimately it's your decision. And I'm like, no, actually it's your decision. And he was like, okay, that feels really intense, but yeah, my decision, my gut says no. And I was like, cool, then that's it.
Yeah. Well, and it's that, you know, everyone feels like they have input in a decision that, because it impacts everyone. So even if it's like not in my lane or it's not in my job description, like I can still give feedback or input on something.
I love that. It feels really good. And especially because the trust is there. And so even if like worst case scenario, it was the wrong call, then we fix it as a team.
Correct.
Oh, it's delicious.
So recommendations can be made, but no one can be forced or made to do something. Group decisions are permitted if there is no objectionable offense. So like it is in violation to the purpose or values. So this eliminates sort of office politics. It eliminates this, oh, you vetoed my project, so now out of spite, I'm going to veto your project. Or this scarcity mindset of, I don't want you to get resources because I want my thing to get funded. It's like, if you have an idea, then you follow the advice guidance, you come up with a loose proposal, and as long as it doesn't is objectively against what it is that the evolutionary purpose, then things get passed.
Wow, it makes so much sense.
If there is difficulty deciding something, then there's no middle management, they have regional coaches, or at least that's what one of the organizations have. And the regional coach is tasked with coming in and asking thoughtful, insightful questions, like leading them through an exploratory process to arrive at the answer, not telling them what to do. And then, if need be, the CEO will come in. But again, the CEO is not there to just make the decision for them. The CEO is tasked with helping facilitate that conversation. Um, in a self-governing system, there's usually like 10 to 12 is a team. I think the recommendation was not to go above 15. Also, they're coming up with terminology that is specific to the organization. So I just use remodelers.
I love it.
So that there's no like, because there's no job descriptions, there's no job titles. It is a term that signifies that we're all like in service and steward of the organization.
I like steward too.
Yeah, I love the idea of like a living entity that, because if it's a living entity, then you don't have to know the answer. Like you don't have to you just have to be tuned in to and sense like what is happening and how does this organization want to actualize and then make decisions that support it. So everyone's trained in nonviolent communication and emergent strategy. Everyone will read Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, and if Adrienne Marie Brown could come and do a workshop, it would be a dream.
Yeah, absolutely.
And emergent strategy is about shaping the conditions through which a group can engage in relatively simple interactions and generate many possibilities and even contradictory ones, and then explore and try out and adapt these possibilities into actions in support of moving towards shared goal or goals. So it's like taking nature, observing nature, and using the principles that are already present within nature to inform meetings, how decisions are made, how organizations are run.
That's social ecology.
Right? And so what is the ecosystem of the organization and everyone who works there?
And how can we get it to match nature, which is nature is always increasing in diversity. It is always evolving to greater efficiencies. It's always in harmony. There's never any waste. Yeah.
So there's no jobs and no job descriptions unless there's a specific public need for like grants or foundations. Needs organically arise from the group. Staff and administrative functions are delegated for a period of time. No one person holds too many staff or administrative functions as to not concentrate power and create hierarchy. So like you were asking last time about like we have these consultants, like we have, we're working on development right now. So what I would say is you would create like an ad hoc committee, like there's a development committee. That development committee is made of however many individuals. These are the tasks of that committee, but that committee is eventually going to go away. Like once the app is built, it may shift and morph into something else. But that needs always arise from within the group itself, and then tasks are delegated and assigned. And it's assigned based on interests. This is part of it being a neurospicy organization. So people sign up for things that they want to do, that they're interested in, that they're passionate about, and that also coupled with their experience or what they are particularly skilled at.
Right. So when we need a spreadsheet and Holly's like, I volunteer to make the spreadsheet, we're like, cool.
Great.
Go get your spreadsheet, girl.
Right?
Yeah.
And what that allows is, let's say, I think in typical organizations, what happens is like, okay, take the Holly example. Like Holly's really great at making spreadsheets. So then Holly would be regulated to making all the spreadsheets. And it would be like, this is what you do.
Yeah, pigeonholed into it.
Right? But if Holly was like, I'm really interested in marketing or video production, or I'm really interested in facilitation, then Holly could learn skills. And so maybe on this project, she does this, and then on this project, she does that, as opposed to these really strict and narrowly defined roles that don't allow for people to grow. Because in a hierarchy organization, self-development is geared toward getting you to the next level. So
of the one thing you do.
Of the one thing you do, or like, oh, you're moving into a managerial position, cool, then you're going to learn how to be a manager and build that skill set, and keep going up the ladder to learn more and more skills about this very specific thing, as opposed to education and development that could be a wide range of topics and interests. That I think, thinking about a business as a neurodivergent, like all of the skills that we're incorporating right now, we would not have known would be necessary skills in this development. And so telling someone that they can't learn something or develop something because it's not within their role or doesn't seem germane to what it is that they're doing is limiting people. And part of evolutionary organizations is wholeness. So how are you bringing your whole self, your whole person into work? So shadowing varied roles, and remodelers would become utility players.
It all comes full circle.
It all comes full circle.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
So one of the things I thought about, like, okay, what would this look like? All remodelers would take all of the classes offered through the app.
Fuck yeah.
So that everyone has that that knowledge. Volunteer ad hoc committees are created. The app development, eventually committees go away. The group may determine there's a need for a permanent staff position. Holly, the person does not have any more or less power decision making. Roles naturally shift as the company shifts. So again, what typically happens in an organization is that maybe there's a restructuring, or a department gets eliminated, and now they're scrambling and they're trying to, they either lay people off or they're trying to put people in roles that, like, to keep them, but that role is not necessarily what's best for them and doesn't highlight their strengths or their interests. But because there's no roles and there's no job descriptions, then there may be a task that you are doing. Let's say you're on the ad hoc development committee. Eventually that committee goes away. You still have your job. You then are looking for, like, okay, well, what is the next thing? Like, what am I filling that space with? All functions that might have had a department head are now dealt with the group. So we do the marketing, we do the finances, we do the purchasing, we do the HR, we do all of it. There is no department head, because again, that creates hierarchy. It creates blocks in information dissemination. So then it becomes like, oh, well, this is their purview, they're responsible for this is information that they hold on to. And that disconnection and disjointedness begins to occur. Proposals are pitched with a loose budget. Work is self-elected. Time commitment is routinely discussed because wholeness is a core tenet. So life is always present within a self-managing organization. So people can elect, like, this life thing is happening and I'm not going to have as many hours to allocate to this task or this responsibility. One of the things they talk about in the book is that they eliminated, like, hourly positions, and they eliminated clocking in and clocking out. And that what they noticed is that people tend to elect to, if they need to stay later because they're finishing a project and it means 10 minutes over, they're going to do it. If there's a big project that needs to get finished and it requires coming in on a weekend, they elect to do that. If there's also a reduction in hours, they elect to do this. So it's like everything is a conversation and is determined by the group.
It's like novel, but not.
It's
just like so obvious.
They do recommend, so meetings organically arise as needed, but there are certain meetings that we could choose to have like standing meetings. So one of the organizations, I think it's Holacracy, have what is called a governance meeting, I think once a month, which is essentially like, how are the policies and protocols working? Does anything need to be adjusted or changed?
Yeah, we have these in polyamory as well.
You could also have like culture and community impact meetings. So like, how are we continuing to work on our anti-racism and dismantling white supremacy and being anti-misogynistic, anti-capitalist, anti-heteronormativity, anti-ableist, like all these efforts both within the organization but also community impact as well. Because as we know within organizations, right, that's something that is said is a priority, but then it's like, oh, we got really busy or these other things came up and sort of fell off. So having consistent meetings to look at, okay, how are we being held accountable to our mission, our values, and our principles. Circle format for meeting. Meetings become places for vulnerability, appreciation, trust building. Anyone can attend any meeting because, again, information is, there's full transparency. One of the things that they talked about was an open meeting chair. So at any meeting, a member of the company could sit in and observe as if they were the business, like the entity and organization, and ask the question, how is the evolutionary purpose of the organization being served in this moment?
Wow. Love that.
Praise, feedback, criticism are given by anyone consistently. So the idea of yearly evaluations are gone because feedback happens immediate in the moment, and there's a process around how feedback, criticism is handled. This is part of the rupture and repair process, and most of the time it involves if you have feedback for me, you give me the feedback, right?
I don't have to go to HR and then call in a meeting and have a lawyer present and
yeah. And it's there may be quarterly meetings to discuss not evaluate you as a employee, as a worker, but instead it's evaluating is this serving? Is this is your heart still present here? Is what new opportunities are you excited about or are you looking for? And it often becomes places where people are talking about all the great things that you're doing, these sort of quarterly evaluations. Because again, you could see all the things that you do, but then also hearing all the great things that you're doing from your cohorts as well, right? That elimination of resentment where it's I don't know the impact that I'm having in my job because we don't have these spaces to talk about what we're doing. So teams determine their own metrics of success and achievement. So there is no bottom line. There is no sales goals. There is no. It just may be for nuclear fusion. It may be how many villages are created, how many classes are offered at free or reduced rate. Like, we can decide whatever metrics that we want.
Were we all able to keep our salaries where we want them to be without going out of business?
Yeah, like, and those are for us. Like, there is no stakeholders, shareholders, like there is no. So the idea that we have these metrics of success, like, sales goals and numbers, they're also generally utilized for individual bonuses, and there is no individual bonuses in self-governing. There may be company-wide bonuses. So this is where you're talking about with, like, company chef, personal trainer.
Understand this stuff, it would make sense. Love that. Yeah. I love that. I just, we're very artist brain. If there's a reason, well, part of it is systemic. If there's a reason. To my own devices because I have a team of 10, but I would just want people who were like financially minded.
About, like, okay, like family, right? Like the good of the team. like, well, I want $100,000 raise, right? And
Got it. Okay.
with the bid,
Love
that for you. Z.
the book I'm behind. The of these stewards, stewards, is everything I've done, here's everything I know, and also I have experience in this.
Is what is driving you at this moment. Okay, here's what our purpose is. Here's what mine is. It a match? Is it a vibe? Is it a fit?
Wow.
Purpose of the business.
Wow.
Because everything else can be learned. Like you can, it's like, you know what, I don't know how to do like is someone interested in finances, but I don't like cool, take this class, take
I'm so excited.
um this is like a lot of the businesses had internal social media, so how they handle things like information dissemination, task assignment, because we don't have a physical office where people can be. Yeah.
It's the best.
Um, so yeah, I'm trying to think thing about how this could operate. Right now are what are the group hand for employees. Right, purpose, core assumptions and values.
Still watching this. I hope you enjoyed. It's a good grade. Creative float going.